What if everything we thought we knew about was only the beginning, just a carefully polished surface hiding a world of secrets beneath? For years, the public has been fed the same glamorous image: the ambitious actress turned royal duchess, the woman who captured Prince Harry's heart and rebranded herself as one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. But what if that flawless is nothing more than a mask, carefully crafted to conceal a past so wild, so messy, and so unfiltered that even her closest allies would be stunned to learn the truth? Some of the most jaw-dropping details don't come from tabloid speculation or random gossip. They come directly from the people who knew best, including her ex-husband. Imagine being the man who once thought he'd spend the rest of his life with her, only to be cast aside so abruptly that friends say he felt humiliated and betrayed. And yet, in hindsight, may not have lost the love of his life. He may have dodged a bullet. Because according to whispers from insiders and fragments of stories that have leaked over the years, Rise wasn't a fairy tale at all. It was something far more complicated, a carefully calculated reinvention that left behind collateral damage and unanswered questions at every turn. Before the royal titles, before the Netflix deals, before the endless headlines about her battles with the crown, was someone else entirely. A different woman, living a different life, one that looks almost unrecognizable compared to the image we see now. Back then, she was a social butterfly, floating between worlds, blending into every crowd she entered. She knew how to charm, how to connect, and how to become the center of attention, but she also knew how to keep her secrets buried deep. For every smiling photo on a red carpet, there were whispers of nights in Toronto, stories of wild parties, and risky moments that could have derailed her royal ambitions before they even began. The question is simple but haunting. Is the we know today the polished duchess, the media-savvy figure who sits beside Prince Harry, the real? Or has the world been introduced to only one version of her, while the other, far more dangerous version stays hidden in the shadows? Stick with us, because what you're about to hear might just change everything you thought you knew about. Before the royal titles, the palaces, and the endless scrutiny from the world's media was carving out a very different life, one that looked nothing like the duchess we see today. Back then, she was a student at university, a young woman with big ambitions but few guarantees. On the surface, she played the role of a determined actress in the making, but beneath that exterior, there was already a hunger for something greater, something bigger than the life she was born into. Those who knew her then describe her as a social butterfly, someone who knew how to blend in and stand out all at once, had a knack for slipping into different social circles, always leaving behind just enough of an impression to keep people curious, but never enough to reveal the full picture. It was charm mixed with mystery, the kind of combination that made her magnetic, but also hard to truly know. And yet, there were whispers even then. People around her noticed that wasn't just dreaming of Hollywood roles, she had something far more specific in mind. According to friends, she actually kept Prince Harry on her vision board, a striking clue that her ambitions weren't just about breaking into acting. They were about breaking into a lifestyle, a position of influence and power that went far beyond the screen. Then came, his first husband wasn't just another relationship. He was the man who believed he'd found a partner for life, was a successful film producer, connected, respected, and for a time, he gave the stability and access she craved. But the story of their marriage didn't unfold like a fairy tale. In fact, it ended in a way that left scars. Sources close to Say treated him coldly, even cruelly, especially as her ambitions grew. The breakup wasn't just sudden, it was brutal. She didn't simply walk away. She allegedly sent their engagement ring back in the mail, as if their years together could be erased with a single gesture. Friends of Say he was devastated by the coldness of it all. But in the years since, many have argued that may have been the lucky one. Because while he walked away with heartbreak, he also walked away before the storm that was yet to come. Even then, Story wasn't one of innocence. Those who watched her closely say she was already mastering the art of reinvention, already learning how to shift her persona depending on what she wanted and who could give it to her. To some, she was the girl chasing Hollywood dreams. To others, she was the life of the party who always knew where to find the best favors and the hottest scene. And two, she was a partner, until she was. It's here, in these early chapters, that the contradictions in story begin to take shape. Because while the public knows the who stood at the altar with a prince, insiders remember the who once lived a very different life, one that didn't exactly line up with the carefully curated royal image she would later present to the world. By the time landed her role on Suits, life seemed to be falling into place. She had a steady acting job, a glamorous circle of friends, and the freedom to enjoy Toronto, a city buzzing with energy, opportunity, and exclusivity. On the surface, she was the polished actress, climbing the ladder in Hollywood and making her mark in television. But behind the curtain, whispers began to circulate of a very different, one who thrived not just in front of the cameras, but in the shadows of Toronto's underground party scene. Sources who were there say wasn't just another face at these gatherings. She wasn't the guest, she was the organizer, the heartbeat of it all. But these weren't the safe, ordinary house parties or celebrity dinners that one might expect. These were ultra-private, high-energy where discretion was everything and reputations were built on silence. Insiders' claim was the one who made sure everything ran smoothly. Not just the venue or the catering, but the little details, the kind that most people never spoke about in public. Imagine it, Toronto in the mid-2010s. Already seen on TV screens across North America, was living a double life. By day, she was the poised actress playing Rachel. By night, she was allegedly pulling strings in a world where the guest list was tight, the atmosphere electric, and the activities, well, let's just say they weren't the kind of things anyone would want splashed across the front page of a tabloid. Insiders hint that some of these nights carried risks so great that if they had been exposed, this carefully built image would have crumbled long before she ever shook hands with the royal family. We're talking about events where the city's elite mingled with the entertainment crowd, nights where the line between glamour and danger blurred, and where wasn't just a participant but a key player keeping it all under wraps. What makes this even more intriguing is how seamlessly she balanced both worlds. One moment, she was the glamorous actress walking red carpets, giving interviews and posing for paparazzi shots. The next, she was behind the scenes in a private mansion, ensuring the party never ran dry, the guests never went unsatisfied, and most importantly, that nothing leaked to the outside world. It was, in many ways, a rehearsal for the role she would later play on the global stage. The woman who could craft an image so flawlessly polished that it left little trace of the chaos beneath it. And here, where things get really interesting. Some insiders claim that even Prince Harry, before the royal wedding, before the fairy tale romance, found himself pulled into this world. Imagine it. Harry, the prince with the mischievous smile and a reputation for enjoying a good time, allegedly rubbing elbows at one of these secret gatherings, guided not by royal protocol, but by social connections. If that's true, then Harry didn't just fall in love with. He fell headfirst into her carefully curated world, one that played by a very different set of rules than the monarchy he grew up in. The question is, how much of this was strategy? Was deliberately crafting a new network of influence and power while keeping the royal future she dreamed of in her sights? Or was she simply living a double life, indulging in a scene that she thought would remain hidden forever? Either way, this Toronto chapter reveals a very few people would recognize today, not the duchess in designer gowns, but the party planner extraordinaire who thrived in secrecy. Rewind to 2011. Before royal headlines, before Netflix deals, before palace drama, was just another Hollywood actress tying the knot with her longtime boyfriend, film producer. The location: a dreamy beach in Jamaica. At first glance, it looked like the kind of destination wedding most brides dream of: turquoise waters, golden sand, and close friends and family gathered for a picture-perfect ceremony. But what happened at that wedding, according to insiders, was anything but ordinary. You'd expect romance, champagne toasts, and maybe a steel drum band playing softly in the background. Instead, the whispers from guests paint a very different picture. Allegedly, rolled out 100 joints, yes, 100 for her wedding guests. Not exactly the kind of something borrowed, something blue you'd expect from a future duchess. This wasn't a subtle gesture or a small indulgence tucked away in the shadows. It was bold, loud, and a clear signal of the kind of bride was at the time. Someone who wanted her wedding remembered not for the vows, but for the... Now, to be clear, none of this ever made its way into official photographs or glossy wedding announcements. On paper, it was simply a beach wedding in paradise. But insiders insist it was a defining moment that revealed who really was before the world ever thought of her as royalty. This wasn't the refined duchess we'd later see in London. This was in her element, commanding attention, ensuring the party vibe never dipped, and showing just how far she was willing to go to keep guests entertained. The bigger question here is, why? Why take such a risk at an event where family, friends, and industry insiders were watching? Some suggest it was a way of proving she was the ultimate host, someone who could turn any occasion into an unforgettable experience. Others whisper it was part of a bigger pattern, establishing herself as the go-to figure for excess, secrecy, and control in social circles. And here, where it gets fascinating, this wedding didn't just showcase taste for extravagance. It set the tone for how she navigated life moving forward. She knew how to charm, how to keep people talking, and how to blur the line between public image and private indulgence. Even at her own wedding, she was shaping a narrative not one of romance, but of power and influence. Looking back now, with its royal reputation hanging over everything she's done, this Jamaican wedding feels less like a personal milestone and more like a preview. A preview of how could seamlessly weave secrecy and spectacle into one unforgettable event, long before she had a global audience watching her every move. If there's one thing has mastered, it's the art of reinvention. To some, she's the actress who hustled her way up from small roles to a breakout spot on Suits. To others, she's the polished duchess who charmed a prince and seemed to effortlessly step into the royal spotlight. But according to those who knew her best, her greatest skill isn't acting on screen, it's acting in real life. Think about it. In Hollywood, she played the role of the ambitious professional, a woman with brains, beauty, and drive. In royal life, she rebranded into the poised, well-spoken wife who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the queen. And yet, behind closed doors, sources insist there was another entirely. A side of her that thrived in Toronto's high-energy party scene, a side most people never imagined could exist alongside the Duchess image. This wasn't just a woman balancing two lives. Insiders suggest it was like watching a shapeshifter at work, someone who could adjust her personality depending on the room she was in. Around producers and Hollywood executives was the charming actress. With friends in Toronto's elite circles, she was the organizer of exclusive gatherings. And once Harry entered the picture, she became the nurturing, supportive partner, helping him navigate a life of fame and scrutiny. But here's the kicker. Sources claim didn't just switch roles. She rewrote her entire story whenever it suited her. Old friends, cut off. Past connections, quietly erased. Any detail that didn't align with her new image was swept aside. It was as if she had the ability to press delete on anything that threatened her carefully crafted persona. Even her earliest relationship with Joshua, her first boyfriend when they were just teenagers, is treated today as little more than a footnote in her life. The genius of strategy was that no one ever quite knew which version was the real one. Was she the actress fighting for her place in Hollywood? The party planner keeping secrets hidden? The doting duchess holding Harry's hand? Or was she all of them at once, slipping into whichever role guaranteed the most power at that moment? And that leads us to the big question. How long can someone keep up so many versions of themselves before the stories start to collide? Because as polished as public image may seem, the cracks begin to show the moment contradictions surface. And once they do, the truth becomes harder to control. When Prince Harry's romance went public, the world framed it as a modern-day fairy tale. A Hollywood actress meets a British prince, they fall in love, and together they step into the spotlight as one of the most talked-about couples of the decade. But if you peel back the glossy headlines and picture-perfect photos, a different story emerges, one far less about romance and far more about strategy, secrecy, and survival. According to insiders, didn't just offer Harry love. She offered him something he had been chasing for years, freedom. But not freedom in the noble, royal sense. No, this was the kind of freedom Harry craved away from stiff palace protocols, endless rules, and the suffocating scrutiny of the monarchy. Knew how to navigate the shadows, how to keep things off the record, and how to ensure certain details never reached the public eye. And for Harry, who'd been caught in more than a few scandals of his own over the years, that kind of skill was priceless. In many ways, became more than a wife. She became a protector, a manager, even a fixer. Insiders suggest she kept Harry's wilder impulses under wraps, ensuring the press never got wind of his less-than-royal late-night habits. Had already proven she could keep secrets from her Toronto years, and now she applied those same tactics to life with Harry. Together, they became partners in secrecy, each guarding the other's image as if their futures depended on it. But that raises a crucial question. Was this relationship truly built on love, or was it a carefully constructed alliance? Because while the public saw endless displays of affection, behind closed doors, it seems Harry may have been bound by something deeper than romance: mutual dependence. Harry leaned on for protection and discretion. Leaned on Harry for the global platform that transformed her from an actress into one of the most recognized women in the world. And while this dynamic worked in the short term, the cracks were inevitable. After all, when your bond is tied together by secrecy, what happens when those secrets start to slip through the cracks? What happens when the royal family realizes that the they thought they welcomed in wasn't the same who existed behind the scenes? It's here that the story takes a darker turn, because the ability to manage appearances wasn't just about Harry. It extended to herself as well. And when whispers began about her own changes, from her physical transformation to her shifting narratives, it became clear that the world was starting to notice the inconsistencies. For anyone following's journey, one thing has always stood out. Her appearance has changed dramatically over the years. Now, it's normal for people in Hollywood to update their look. New styles, evolving fashion choices, a little cosmetic tweak here and there, it all comes with the territory. But when it comes to, insiders claim her transformation went far beyond fitting into Hollywood's beauty standards. Let's start with her features. Observers have pointed out subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, changes, especially in her nose, jawline, and overall presentation. On the surface, it looks like a natural evolution of style. But whispers from those who knew her during her Toronto years suggest something else entirely. According to these sources, this makeover may not have been just about glamour. It may have been about erasing a past she didn't want the world to see. Think about it. Was juggling two very different lives. The ambitious actress climbing the Hollywood ladder and the social butterfly navigating Toronto's underground party scene. If even part of those rumors were true, it would make sense for her to want to distance her new, polished self from any trace of the old one. And what better way to do that than with a transformation so striking it made comparisons to her past harder and harder to draw. Timing is everything. This reinvention seemed to happen just as her relationship with Harry was heating up. Right when her name was about to become global, right when the press would begin digging into every inch of her past, appeared in public with a look so refined, it seemed almost calculated. As if she knew the old version of herself couldn't survive under the microscope of royal scrutiny. Of course, has never publicly admitted to any of this. And to be fair, speculation about cosmetic changes often says more about public obsession than it does about the person in question. But what makes this different is the context. Sources hint that transformation wasn't just about vanity, it was about survival. It was about burying the image of Toronto's party planner and presenting the world with a duchess in the making. And here's the real twist. Her timing lined up almost too perfectly. Just as features sharpened and her style refined, her royal debut was right around the corner. Was this coincidence, or was it a deliberate move to ensure that Toronto was left behind for good? If transformation was about presenting a new image to the world, then what came next was about making sure nothing from her past could threaten that image. Insiders claim that as Star began to rise, she didn't just reinvent herself. She systematically erased anything that didn't fit her new narrative. Friends who once shared her journey suddenly found themselves pushed out of her inner circle. Old connections from Hollywood, school, and even her own family seemed to fade into the background. Sources suggest wasn't just moving forward, she was hitting the delete button on her past. Think about it. Most of us have embarrassing old Facebook photos or awkward memories that we'd rather not relive. But this approach went far beyond casual distancing. According to those close to her, she deliberately cut ties with people who knew too much about the old. friends she partied with in Toronto, colleagues from earlier acting gigs, even family members who might reveal details she preferred hidden. All of them slowly disappeared from her story. And it worked. By the time entered the royal spotlight, her public image was so carefully controlled that most of the world believed the version presented to them. The ambitious actress, the humanitarian, the perfect duchess-to-be. What wasn't visible were the people left behind, the ones who remembered a who didn't align with this new, polished identity. Even official accounts of her past seemed to shrink. The palace biography, once expected to highlight her Hollywood ambitions and life before Harry, was trimmed down to something startlingly simple. Actress from Suits. Gone were the details that didn't fit the new story. It was as if it edited her own script, cutting out the characters and scenes that no longer served her brand. Some might call it ruthless. Others might call it genius. After all, reinvention on this scale isn't easy. It takes precision, control, and the willingness to let go of anyone or anything that doesn't fit the image you want the world to see. But it also raises a bigger question. What was so desperate to hide? Was it simply about looking refined enough for royal life, or was it about keeping certain truths buried forever? One thing is clear, by the time married Harry, she wasn't just stepping into a new role. She was stepping into a world where her past could never fully disappear. And no matter how carefully she deleted the old chapters, the contradictions were bound to catch up with her. For someone who worked so hard to craft a flawless image, Story is full of contradictions that refuse to stay buried. On one hand, she's painted herself as the unsuspecting actress who knew little about Harry before their first date. On the other, she's admitted to Googling him and even having him on her vision board long before their paths crossed. It's these inconsistencies that make people question just how much of Story was genuine and how much was carefully staged. Take the story of her and Harry's secret trip to Africa. It's often told as the romantic spark that cemented their love. But sources suggest the timeline doesn't exactly match up with the official version. And when those discrepancies started to surface, the palace didn't ignore them. Instead, they quietly began editing biography, cutting out anything that might raise questions or fuel gossip. What had once been presented as the tale of an ambitious Hollywood actress with big dreams was suddenly trimmed down to a single, safe line. Actress from Suits. That's it. No mention of her broader ambitions, her social life in Toronto, or the more colorful chapters of her past. It was a deliberate narrowing of her story, a royal rebrand designed to silence the whispers and erase the contradictions. But here's the problem with contradictions. They never stay quiet for long. The more stories shifted, the more people noticed. And the more people noticed, the harder it became to maintain the perfect Duchess persona. Was she truly the wide-eyed actress swept off her feet by a prince? Or was she a strategist, shaping her own fairy tale with meticulous precision? The royal family may have hoped the edits and rebrand would protect her. But instead, they highlighted just how fragile her carefully built image really was. After all, when you start cutting details out of the story, people inevitably ask, what are you trying to hide? And that's where contradictions become more than just small inconsistencies. They become cracks in the foundation of her entire public identity. Each one a reminder that the image the world sees might not be the whole truth, and that the real could be far more complicated and far more controversial than anyone imagined. When you build your life on a carefully constructed image, every contradiction, every rumor, every hidden detail becomes a potential threat. For her story has always been about control, controlling her narrative, controlling her image, and controlling which parts of her past are allowed to surface. But the truth is, no house of cards can stand forever. Think about it. Each time reinvented herself, she left pieces of her old life behind. The Hollywood hustler, the Toronto party planner, the ambitious social climber. Each version was carefully buried beneath the polished exterior of a duchess. But as time went on, the cracks began to show. Stories resurfaced. Old connections whispered. Contradictions piled up. And suddenly, the narrative didn't look so seamless anymore. What happens when those hidden pieces collide with the image she's worked so hard to protect? That's the danger faces. Every inconsistency, every erased chapter, every unanswered question is like pulling a card from the stack. One or two might not matter, But eventually, the whole structure risks collapsing. And here's the twist. It's not just who stands to lose. Prince Harry, the royal family, even the institutions that back their story have tied themselves to this narrative. If carefully curated persona unravels, it could drag down far more than just her reputation. It could expose the cracks in the royal machine itself, revealing how much effort goes into protecting not just individuals, but the image of the monarchy as a whole. The million-dollar question is simple. How long can it last? How long can keep balancing the Duchess on one hand and the erased past on the other before one side topples the other? Because when the House of Cards falls, and history shows it always does, the fallout isn't just personal. It's public, messy, and impossible to control. And maybe that's why has always stayed one step ahead, erasing, editing, and reshaping her story before anyone else can. But as more stories emerge, as more insiders speak out, and as more contradictions come to light, the risk grows higher. The House of Cards is shaking. The only question left is when, not if, it will collapse. After everything, the reinventions, the contradictions, the secrecy, the transformations, we're left with a question that seems impossible to answer. Who is the real? Is she the polished Duchess we see smiling for cameras, delivering carefully chosen words at global events? Or is she the Toronto socialite who thrived in private, exclusive circles where discretion was more valuable than diamonds? Maybe she's both. Or maybe she's someone else entirely, someone we've only caught glimpses of through the cracks in her carefully maintained story. What makes so fascinating is not just what we know, but what we don't know. Every erased friend, every edited biography, every unexplained contradiction adds another layer of mystery. Was she simply doing what anyone would, reshaping herself to survive and succeed in a world that demands perfection? Or was it something more deliberate, a calculated reinvention designed to hide a past too messy to ever face in public? Even now, years after her royal debut, remains an enigma. For some, she's a role model, a woman who tradition and carved her own path. For others, she's a strategist, always several steps ahead, willing to play whatever role gets her the power and influence she wants. Both versions may be true, and maybe that's the key to understanding her, is not one thing but many things at once, constantly shifting depending on the moment. And that's why the fascination never ends. Because as much as tries to control the narrative, the truth always finds a way to seep through the cracks. The polished Duchess, the Hollywood actress, the secretive party planner, they're all part of the same story. The only question is which version will ultimately define her legacy. So, who is the real? The answer might be simpler and more unsettling than we think. She's whoever she needs to be, and that's what makes her both impossible to pin down and impossible to ignore.